So welcome everyone. It is my pleasure to introduce Jakub Morawiec of the Center of Old Norse and Old English Studies, who is co-organizing this seminar and will introduce us shortly to the center and its activities, and who will also introduce our speaker, Rafał Borysławski, from the University of Silesia at Katowice, who will then, after the introduction, speak to us about the phoenix and the whale, apophatic fear in Old English poetic zoologies. Questions will be taken at the end. So please, Jakub, introduce us to CBNS. Thank you.
Thank you, Judith. Once again, good afternoon, everybody. It's my great pleasure to be part of this today meeting. That's great pleasure for both Rafał and me to be invited as co-organizers of this very meeting. It's very special for us as we have already defined relatively still young community, which is the research center, to be a co-organizer and partner of such renowned society. And for me also it is important that we can, by cooperating with you and being a special guest today, confirm how important for us is to handle both fields, Old Norse and Old English, within all the activities that we undertake. Perhaps I will just immediately skip to the slide that features the most important basic information about our research center that was founded in June 2020. And we had the chance to use the opportunity of kind of regroup and regather as individuals at the University of Silesia who, at one hand, have been dealing with different aspects of early medieval studies, representing mainly two basic disciplines, which is history and literary studies, and start working together on more both official and efficient way, because actually when it comes to different kinds of activities and initiatives that were taken together by us, the history is much longer. And with this, we could kind of make it not even more serious, but perhaps more regular. And such a center provides also us kind of a new opportunities, and it's an ideal opportunity to also gather and new people and work in different more variable environments. So that was very nice for us to have such opportunity. We had to actually meet two basic criteria. Those criteria were not so much difficult for us. The first one is a blending of different disciplines and also kind of international outreach of what we are doing. And this is what we try to do on daily basis. That's why we got permission to start our center, which we did. So the basic information about who is there and what we are doing is to be found on our media, above the website, the Facebook profile. And the group of us is, it started with core 4 people who kind of initiated the whole thing, or kind of founding members, so to speak. With time, the group expanded. We are happy that we have been able to incorporate postdoc researchers, and also we cooperate with other scholars within different projects. So the group is now even actually twice as much as it was at the beginning, and we are very happy because this is a very kind of lively and versatile group that I'm sure, and Rafał hopefully will confirm, kind of has some potential to do even more. So it's both professionally, personally, really nice environment. We try to focus our research on different topics, and it's not actually anything surprising concerning the fact that we came together from different angles, different interests, classic, historic, more traditional philological studies. However, not only attempt to deal with both fields, Old Norse and Old English, but actually an attempt to kind of blend them together, to find a platform for common and joint approach to similar historical cultural processes that were taking place both in medieval Scandinavian and medieval Anglo-Saxon world. This is the idea of our research. Of course, different people are focused on different aspects of ideological studies, religious studies, of course, Scandinavian, Old Norse, Icelandic literature. We all, except for research, classic, typical research of various texts, we also are very active in the field of translating texts into Polish. We focus on different Icelandic sagas. Currently, we are working on a translation of 3 texts that more or less refer within the narratives to Western Slavonic territories. This is Knytlinga Saga, Jomsvikinga Saga, and Ingvar Saga. Those translations should be finished, completed by May next year. This list also features the topic that currently occupies Rafał's mind research, so the fear, poetics and politics of fear in Old English literary tradition. And I'm very happy that this kind of lively kind of group kind of combines so much versatile topics, and also the center has created a platform for us to exchange and share experiences and our personal approaches to these problems. This is very important for such a community, because previously we had been dealing more separately, and now we can see benefits of chances of actually interaction on daily basis, interaction, not only from a meeting or conference to conference, but actually on daily basis. This is very, very important. Of course, the research should, unfortunately, does provide results with various publications released both in Poland and abroad, both single-author monographs, multi-author monographs. Those of some of these volumes actually kind of the final products of many conferences we have been organizing or co-organizing. There are some who are still in the process of making and print, so I'm sure this list will only expand. And of course, it is important for both us as the center and also people who carefully look at our activities, especially here at the university, that we are kind of active and important producers of publications of different sorts. So we try to of course pay these duties willingly and try to make it as exciting as possible. Of course, considering the fact that sometimes the publication process takes time, but again, possibility to co-working together is very, very important for us. The center has been and is, and I'm sure will be, heavily involved in organization of various conferences. Rafał has his history with the set of conferences to organize with his student circle of H story, very important, of very interesting, as you can see on the titles, very interesting topics, bringing people from different corners of Europe and beyond. We are also involved in another chain conference called the Jomsborg Conference, which focuses mainly on medieval Scandinavia. And apart from that, also other initiatives of this kind, seminars, conferences organized both here in Katowice and elsewhere. So we try to kind of keep being kind of active on that because we know how important it is for academic life and the center as such. So far so good, and let's hope we will be able to both be involved and also invite people to the center and provide a platform of different discussions on relevant and important research topics that would also be beneficial for us as the researchers who are involved in this body. Research is one thing, making science popular is another one, and also actually all the staff that is gathered in the center is very much active in that. It's not only about providing science in more lighter way to the wider public. This is one thing, and it happens all the time in various circumstances. Poland is a place where all the kinds of initiatives concerning Scandinavian culture, both in historical and present times, is very much popular. So it's a large room for us to be very active. Actually, in 3 weeks' time, part of us go to one of the towns in Poland, in Torun, for Nordic Days. So this is all the time when we can actually be in touch with people who are just enthusiasts of the North, so to speak, and we can actually provide them with something hopefully interesting and inspiring. There are sometimes really big initiatives that we are actually constantly cooperating with, for example, the Viking Festival in Wolin, and also very important initiative co-organized by our university, which is called the Silesian Festival of Science, and is taking place every winter. So we try to be constantly there to mark our presence and also provide people with everything that is hopefully interesting and we are involved in. So once the pandemic starts, we also, as many other bodies and places, enter this kind of chain of online meetings, quite regular ones. We are very happy because throughout actually for 3 years, we've been able to gather numerous interesting people who either provided talks or also promoted the latest releases. So it's also nice for us to kind of show people what is going on within the sphere of publications. And we are very happy that actually sometimes, as it is now, it is difficult actually to find gaps in the calendar to insert kind of a new interesting guest that would love to have. So that's a kind of very nice actually problem that we sometimes have to solve. One of the highlights of our activities so far took place last year in Wolin. We managed to organize a summer school that was focused on Scandinavian Slavonic interactions in the Viking Age, with Wolin as a kind of both symbolic and real kind of hub of those interactions of different kinds. The summer school was funded by European money. We've been able to gather almost 40 international students, plus some students from Poland. 14 teachers from both Poland and abroad provided the teaching. There was very lively, very intense 2 weeks time that will, I'm sure we'll remember long. And so you can see the pictures of all those people who decided to come to Wolin and spend those 2 weeks with us. And as far as we know, most of them was really happy that such a chance occurred. Those people already asked us during the school if we are going to continue this initiative. Who knows, perhaps it will be possible for us in the future to return to this initiative, especially as it is also or was a living proof of our possibility to cooperate with different institutions and people, because what you can see in the background is a very lively accommodation provided by the Viking Center in Wolin, our serious partner, and also the teachers who came from different institutes in Europe. So yeah, that was really a nice time. When it comes to the future, well, actually, as the research center, we try to continue what we have been doing so far with some kind of very important things going on very soon. In August 25, we are going to host the 90th International Saga Conference, very prestigious, at the same time, very challenging thing. So the preparations to this conference have been already started, and it's plenty of both time-consuming, sometimes also exciting work. We don't forget about publications. We hope that next year will provide us with translations of sagas and other publications that will mark our conferences. So we hope the future will be even only bright, and we'll be happy to continue what we have been doing so far, and to what makes us really exciting be a part of this constellation, so to speak, of different scholars who can share their interest in both Old English and Old Norse studies. So this is about the center, and I'm not only very happy to have a chance to present it to you here, but I also like to express my hope that if it would be a chance for us to cooperate on different levels with such important bodies like the society we guest today, because we know that it is very important generally in academia and humanities perhaps even more, to be in touch, to have a chance to exchange ideas, because only then we can kind of push this research we do further in order to get the only better and more kind of satisfactory results. So I hope it is not it is our first, but I hope not our last meeting, and we'll have a chance to cooperate on different levels. And I'm sure that the colleague of mine, friend of mine, Rafał, who is main star of today, is guarantee of such good collaborations. And I'm really happy that I can present him to you. Of course, there's plenty to tell about his research profile, which is absolutely not only kind of rich, but also influential. And Rafał, through his publications, through his lectures, research on Anglo-Saxon culture and literature, starting with riddles up till emotions, and now fear, has proven how important it is for proper research to be able and open for different research angles. In our case of our center, at least history and literary linguistic studies. This is so important. And Rafał has been always ready and open for, kind of embrace all these different things within his research. And as I know that it always comes up or ends up with very, first of all, important, but also acknowledged publications. But more than that, Rafał is a great personality, and I keep saying that this is the nicest part of our center. Because his energy, his attitude, his positive attitude, makes me always feel better. That all the times that you feel kind of little bit depressed, you can always think about Rafał and how his enthusiasm to life, and also his very friendly approach to people. This is something that he can be an example of how to deal with this. So that is my great pleasure that we actually can collaborate, not only professionally, but also kind of share time together as friends, as colleagues. So I'm sure we are going to listen to very inspiring and interesting talk, as always in the case of Rafał. So yeah, that's my great pleasure and honor to say a few words about my dear colleague here in this very acknowledged community. So I'm sure, Rafał, we will
Thanks
enjoy.
so much. I'm moved. As you can see, I was nearly moved to tears. Thanks so much, Jakub, for this, generous, perhaps too generous introduction, and thank you very much, for inviting to ISSEME, is represented by Elise, Judith, and Thijs, who's perhaps going to join us a little later. For opening the ISSEME platform to the center, and also to the humble researchers that is very much a work in progress. I will just add before I'll start sort of sharing my slides. I hope they're going to be sorry before I proceed with my talk is on the phoenix and the whale. Yeah, let me just add to what Jakub was saying, that we really are keen and very open to not only cooperation, but also open to cooperation with various people who are pursuing their sort of postdoctoral careers. And I was recently sharing with ISSEME information about one of the Polish governmental programs that allows for rather generous funding for a period of 2 or 3 years. Yes, so perhaps perhaps this information is going to sort of circulate somewhere there. There are several programs like that, and the calls are open usually sort of twice every year, and for people who are on the lookout, yes, we hope that the center may provide an interesting opportunity. So thank you very much again. And if I suppose I can proceed yes, with the talk. So once again, a very good afternoon to everyone here online and everyone on YouTube. And thank you for inviting me to present as part of ISSEME virtual seminars. It's both a pleasure and an honor, obviously, to address so many remarkable scholars and to see online a number of familiar faces and names. Thank you for deciding to spend part of this afternoon with me discussing the problem of fear in several examples of what I would maybe broadly call Old English zoologies. As Kuba has already mentioned, my talk and presentation this afternoon is a work in progress, which is a part of a larger project devoted to the study of fear in Old English poetry, for which I have received a grant endowment from the Republic of Poland's National Science Center. And this emotionological approach is concerned with what I call the poetics and politics of fear. That is, again, broadly speaking, an approach connected both with fear as a type of an aesthetic category and as a mode of intellectual mediation and a cognitive mechanism. Hence, my intention is to study the ways in which this emotion is described and prescribed across a range of Old English poetic compositions against the necessary backdrop of the exegetical material provided by the early medieval church fathers and their Neoplatonic thought. My talk is going to be divided into stages, as I hope the slides kind of progress. If you could just signal this once, that you can see the next slide, I'll be,
Yes, we can.
Really, thank you. Yeah. So my talk is going to be divided into stages. I will begin by explaining the choice of the two Exeter Book poems, principal for this presentation, the Phoenix and the Whale, and by presenting the rationale behind this perhaps slightly odd decision. I will then refer to several examples of the perspectives on the understanding of fear within Christian thought and Old English homiletics, in order to relate it to the category of wonder, again, in its sort of philosophical, but also slightly linguistic dimension. And I will return to the poems in order to pay closer attention to several ways in which fear is manifested and functions there, from its explicit presence to its implied presence, and to what I call its negative presence, which I also call apophatic, and which is not to mean absence, but rather the sort of unfear understood as the positive agent of discernment of what lies outside of fear. Unsurprisingly, this is going to lead us towards a Christian comprehension of fear as the necessary path both to understanding and salvation. The aim I wish to propose and pursue here is not so much the study of Old English zoologies and the physiologist-related Old English poems from the Exeter Book through the perspective of fear, but rather an examination of the correlation between fear, wonder, cognition, and Christian ethics on the examples of these poems. Thus, the Old English zoologies, for want of a better name, serve here rather as a pretext for this emotionological scrutiny of the rhetorical uses of fear in poetry. And this pragmatic and anthropocentric perspective is therefore not intended to operate within the sphere of animal studies per se, but constitutes a sort of methodological application of perhaps the best known and sort of most succinct medieval poetic commentary on the relation between the natural world and mankind, left to us by the 12th century theologian poet Alanus ab Insulis, or Alain de Lille. In the often recalled verses of his Litmus Alter, he asserts that omnis mundi creatura quasi libera pictura nobis est in speculum nostre vitae, nostre mortis nostri status, nostre soltis fidele signaculum. Is all the creatures of the world unto us like a book, a picture, and a mirror. They faithfully signify our life, our death, our present state, and our passing. Alain de Lille's message is clear, therefore it replicates the conclusion of the book of Genesis, and however little we might like it in light of the current eco-critical discourse, it reverberates on the pages of early and late medieval bestiaries, physiology, and books of wonder. The world has been created for mankind, according to this message, and therefore it contains the key not merely to itself, but to mankind and its place within the cosmic struggle. In the manner of the then geographic conception of the physical world, with Jerusalem tellingly located at its center, the animate world presented in the poetry of the time is focused on eschatological questions and is consistently to be treated symbolically and allegorically, as encoding sense is crucial for mankind. And we arrive then at the potential moot point of this inquiry. That is the rationale behind choosing as primary texts two of the Exeter book poems that are separated by a substantial body of verse, and more importantly, that are derived from different original sources. The Phoenix, with its 678 lines extending between the end of folio 55 verso and folio 65 verso, is by and large believed to have been inspired by the Latin poem Carmen de Ave Fenice by Lactantius, an early Christian author and theologian associated with Emperor Constantine. The much shorter Whale, whose 88 lines stretch between the folios 96 verso and 97 verso, constitutes a part of what scholars have long termed to be the Old English Physiologus, consisting of the allegory of Christ in the panther and the allegory of damnation in the whale, and the fragmentary poem of which, depending on the edition, survives either just 1.5 lines or some 15 lines, referring to an unspecified bird and followed by a fragmentary and closing address by Christ, sometimes edited as a separate homiletic fragment 3. This third, almost non-existent poem is either taken to be the partridge, which follows the original sequence of animals in the Latin Physiologus, or, as Michael D.C. Drought conjectures, is a presentation of a phoenix itself. Andrea Rossi Reda also sees the three Physiologus poems of the Exeter book as a closely knit whole, which she convincingly explains is as an Easter allegory belonging to the homiletic tradition of the liturgical year. To provide a very brief summary of the two relatively well-known poems, let me say that The Phoenix opens with the description of the ideal land populated by a miraculous bird, famed for its 500-year long cycle of its life, immolation in a carefully constructed nest, and subsequent rebirth later, all meticulously presented in the poem's first part. The poem's second part, absent in Lactantius, provides a Christian interpretation, with a message stemming from a dual presentation of the bird as both an allegory of Christ and of the people who follow him, and will, like the phoenix, rise again after the necessary cleansing. The whale consists of two episodes that display the duplicitous nature of the beast. It deceives unexpecting sailors who mistake it for an island and are later dragged into the deep and drowned by the fastitokolon, as it is called. The second part of the poem speaks of the whale tricking unsuspecting fish and people into the perdition of its mouth because of the deceitfully sweet odor that the whale's mouth produces. Both episodes serve as obvious demonstrations of the duplicity of the devil against those who lack caution and discernment. What is then the reason, you're likely to ask, to juxtapose the poems that, although rooted in the tradition of ancient bestiaries, are clearly inspired by different literary sources? I hasten to explain that it is not the animals with their fantastic description that are meant to be at the center of this discussion, but the way the poems are crafted emotionally and the way they may have exerted their emotional influence on their audiences. The correlation between the phoenix and the whale is based on a sequence of binary contrasts, of which several I will list later. But at the center lies the juxtaposition between the plight and wisdom of those who are willing to accommodate the divine will through the wonder and fear leading to the wisdom, which is the case of the phoenix, and those who reject divine will and warning through their incompetence in assessing fear and wonder in the whale. My point is then that while both poems are naturally rich in symbolic messages and Christian allegories, unlike the Physiologus-inspired Panther poem, their focus is predominantly directed towards people. While they describe their fantastic protagonists who share some of their symbolism with the figures of Christ and Satan, the phoenix and the whale respectively are not just their representations. Although the panther can be, and indeed has been, associated with the whale poem, its animal protagonist, however, acts solely as a symbol of Christ, whereas the phoenix and the whale poems narrate people, portraying the successful transformation through the phoenix's immolation and the failed transformation experienced by those who are lured to perdition in two different ways, by the way. And since the primary goal here is to consider the implications of Old English emotional, aesthetic, and ethical interactions with fear in the context of Christian animal allegories, it seems fitting to pursue them in the animal-related poem that extols the virtue of Christian transformation, and in the poem that depicts its failure in an animal allegory. As we shall see, what they both offer then is a different, though complementary, engagement of fear as an aesthetic and moral application, the Christian poetics and politics of wonder. In this sense, what I mean by politics, I mean sort of, ways of prescribing, as it were, wonder. In this sense, what also brings them close enough to warrant a comparative analysis is their particular emphasis on the craftsmanship of the creator, which the phoenix and the whale display, even if the outcomes of this craftsmanship are radically different. Now, as one of the primary emotions responsible for the psychosomatic reactions of survival mechanism and associated with heightened cognitive receptiveness, fear is naturally present in various contexts of Old English literature. It may be typically categorized there as a response to either of the two broad stimuli or groups of stimuli, the fear of the death of the body and the fear of the death of the soul, mentioned by Alfred. I'll return to that later. The latter of these is understandably more central to the ethical and moralizing substance of Old English verse. Anthropologically, it results from the biblical tradition that may be linked to the concept in the phenomenology of religion, which the German philosopher and Protestant theologian Rudolf Otto described as a schauervolles Geheimnis, the Mysterium Tremendum, in his 1917 work, Das Heilige, translated as the idea of the holy. Hence, the Timor Dei present in the Old Testament tradition is present in the Old Testament tradition, where the books of Deuteronomy, Job, Ecclesiastes, Proverbs, Psalms, and Isaiah prescribe it as both the expected approach to God and as the only certain path towards wisdom and discernment. Understandably then, these associations also feature prominently in biblical exegesis and commentaries, to mention only some of their examples with which the Old English monastic tradition must have been well acquainted. St. Augustine returns to the fear of God on several occasions in the Doctrina Christiana on Christian doctrine, notably in Book 2, where he presents it as a necessary stage leading to knowledge and ultimately to the love of God. So I'll just read the English translation here by Robert Greene. It is therefore necessary above all else to be moved by the fear of God towards learning his will, what it is that he instructs us to seek or avoid, This fear will necessarily inspire reflection about our mortality and future death, and by nailing our flesh to the wood of the cross, as it were, crucify all our presumptuous impulses. After these two stages, moving on, after these two stages of fear and holiness comes the third stage, that of knowledge. This is the area in which every student of the divine scriptures exerts himself, and what he will find in them is quite simply that he must love God for himself. Gregory the Great's monumental Moralia in Job, is also fixated on the necessity of experiencing and internalizing this kind of fear. Gregory opens the first book of the Moralia by following the book of Ecclesiastes 7:19, believed to have been authored by King Solomon, and by declaring Timor Dei as the necessary prerequisite that protects a person from evil, without which the achievement of wisdom, of the right choice, is impossible. On fearing God and turning away from evil, to fear God, quoting from Gregory, the translation from Gregory the Great, to fear God is never to pass over the good things that ought to be done. As it is said by Solomon, he that fears God neglects nothing, but because some do certain good things in such a way that they are not at all suspended from certain evils. Well, after it is said to fear God, it is also said to depart from evil. Old English renditions of the biblical material also abound in the instances of the use of the motive and theme. The Timor Dei, prominent in the translation of the prose psalms attributed to King Alfred, is prominent in the translations of prose psalms attributed to King Alfred. It's where the phrases Gottes eje berichtnes, Metedes eje are directly invoked in a number of occasions, and where it is also present less directly. In most of these examples, the fear of God is invoked to inspire the state of awe and trepidation, followed by discernment as their implicit consequence. But in the translation of the metrical Psalm 93, the association between the two is expressed overtly, among other rhetorical questions extolling God's greatness. In this, the Old English Psalm departs from the Latin text of the Vulgate. En se the eie herdeth, alum theodum, and his nesi therefore a wicht. Seven man ladeth mikel no wisdom, and he who strikes fear in all the peoples, does not his threat come for nothing, as he teaches mankind much wisdom. One final but outstanding example of this specific application of the state of fear, the Old English homiletic context of the Benedictine Reform, and in particular the homilies of Alfred of Ancient, obviously, who employs the theme in several notable sermons. For instance, in the homily for the third Sunday after Easter, customarily titled Bedam sevenfeldan ongiva, on the sevenfold evil gifts, which which revolves around Christian discernment, Alfred juxtaposes 7 false gifts that the devil tricks people to accept with 7 spiritual gifts that should suffuse every believer. The 7th and most important of the true gifts, which is also one of the graces, is that of Gottes eje. Gottes eje is seo servate thicera castlicia gifa, and seo gifo is angin alles wisdomes, und se the Gottes eje have, neverlet henan thing. The fear of God is the 7th of these spiritual gifts, and that gift is the beginning of all wisdom. And he who has the fear of God lacks nothing. Here, Alfred essentially repeats the message of Gregory's Moralia, but he also speaks of fear more pragmatically in his first homily on Lazarus for the Friday of the 4th week of Lent. He distinguishes there between the 2 types mentioned earlier, the fear of the death of the body and the fear of the death of the soul, and warns against the destructiveness of the one, which is clearly wrong. Alchman ondrad him dada stokime, and fera him ondrada fera saula death. And several lines below. Ondrada swadu ondrada se death the kimth to. Every person fears the coming of death, and yet you fear the death of the soul. Fear the death of the soul, as you fear the death that comes to you. This Judeo-Christian understanding of fear delineates it not so much as the lack of metal or action, but as the virtue of prudence. the psychological reaction of negation, withdrawing, or escaping from the stimuli that cause fear is turned here into their opposites. The greater the fear of God, the more of that fear is desired, as it brings a good Christian closer to its transcendent cause. And since apophatic thinking implies also thinking beyond the objects of one's concern, or perhaps predominantly thinking beyond the objects of one's concern, this moralizing and therapeutic understanding of fear appears to be constructed on a similar principle. It is so because the timor Dei ultimately implies, and from the biblical perspective, even facilitates thinking about what lies outside of it. That is, thinking of wisdom and acquiring discernment. This is what I understand as the apophatic sense of fear, or apophatic fear, to which I will later return in the two Old English poems. I shall soon move to the Phoenix and the Whale, obviously, but one last more general point remains, that of the correlation between fear and wonder, which are crucially interwoven in the two poems. This does not come as surprising, of course, as initial psychosomatic reactions to whatever causes fear and whatever causes wonder are similar. In his recent philosophical discussion of the varieties of wonder, Patrick Sherry recalls how Descartes, in his Passions of the Soul, describes wonder as the first of the passions, and defines it as, I quote, a sudden surprise of the soul, which brings it to consider with attention the objects that seem to it unusual and extraordinary. End of quote. We could invoke Aristotle's famous quip from the first book of Metaphysics that through wonder men began to philosophize both now and in the beginning. The body of Old English literature in general, and the Phoenix and the Whale in particular, abound in instances of wonder, which, however, are often accompanied by the emotion of not only awe, but specifically fear too. And discussing Elfrich's use of the allegories of non-native animals in his sermon, Emily Thornbury notes that when he, that is Elfrich, employs the figure of the elephant and comments on it as, I quote, "Sumum men wile thinkam silich this to Yeherane." To some people, this will seem amazing to hear. Elfrich could mean one of two things. He expects his audience to find the elephant miraculous, silage, or alternately incredible. It seems very likely that both audience reactions are in fact being anticipated. That is, faced with a startlingly unfamiliar incident, he expected some listeners to marvel and some to disbelieve in Thornbury claims. And we may compare it with the introduction to the Old English letter from Alexander to Aristotle here. Seo eorte is the wundriene hwat heo erest otte godra thinga kenne. Otte eftrara evelra. The heodam schawigendum is etoet. Hier ist kennende da fulkudan wildeora und wastma und weja oran und wunderliche with da thing al dam monum the hit yeseot and schawigat waran uneve to ye witane for that misen lichisne. Yet that hioa. The earth arouses wonder first and foremost for the good things she produces, then for evil things, through which she reveals herself to observers. She engenders well-known wild beasts, stones, metals, and wondrous creatures, many of which are difficult to understand for people who see and observe them due to the variety of their forms. The hint at the fear associated with wonder is palpable in Vara Evelera Thinga, those evil things, but it is even more distinctly present in the opening of the Liber Monstrorum de Diversis Generibus, popular in early English scriptoria, where the author engages with his audience by referring to his desire to combine wonder with fear. Here, again, I'm just quoting the English translation, and you were particularly asking me to answer about these three kinds of the world's area which strike the greatest terror or fear in humankind, so that I should record the monstrous parts or births of men and the horrible and innumerable forms of wild beasts and the most dreadful kinds of dragons and serpents and vipers. Lastly, from the linguistic point of view, Helen Adolph's onomasiological inquiry, published in 1947, into the means of expressing fear and wonder by the wundra-related verbs in Western and North Germanic languages, displays their linguistic associations. Writing in 1947, Adolf says that, I quote, the close relationship of these emotions has often been challenged, but it is attested partly by the study of the expression of emotions, partly by the study of language itself. For words that first denoted terror or fright frequently were weakened into expressions of fear and wonder, and words for wonder frequently become terms for admiration. This view is also confirmed in 20th century and contemporary models of emotions. For instance, the psychologist Robert Plutchik who locates amazement, terror, and admiration as closely connected primary emotional states. And in his psychoevolutionary theory of emotions, the behavioral language of withdrawing and escaping associated with fear and terror appears close to stopping and freezing connected with surprise and astonishment. Likewise, the functional correlation of fear with protection is not too distant from that of orientation, which is the function of astonishment. Eventually then, after this series of introductory perspectives on fear, apophatic fear and wonder, to return to the two chosen creatures of the Exeter book. There is no doubt that the phoenix and the whale focus on the transformative need to internalize the sense of wonder, stemming from the paradoxes of divine creation. This wonder is in itself facilitated by the necessary teamwork they, and these are the mutually interdependent premises in which I will build the analysis of the roles of fear in the poems. This comparison is also grounded in the negative parallels that the juxtaposition of the two poems yield. Let us mention their examples, some of which are steeped both in wonder and in the potency to incite fear. So the temporal frames of both protagonists exceed the human scale. The phoenix lives in 500 years cycles, as the whale lives in Finstema, ancient streams of the ocean. It's like a rough stone. Their allegorical anatomies concern eschatological opposites. The phoenix stands for resurrection. The whale represents the opposite of damnation. The phoenix belongs, therefore, in the circle of Christ and is to follow him renewed brightly. Dolne solfastum saulum schinet, her over chrovas, hellende Christ, him folgiat fuglas schine, berchte je bredete. Their holy Christ will shine high over the roofs of the righteously true souls. Shining birds follow him brightly rejuvenated, whereas the whale's mouth is likened to the hell mouth. Donne heda grimman geoman bichlemmet, after felquale fasted together, helle glinduru, nagon chulftnes wiche, woodsit after, father in kuma. Then he slams shut his terrible throat after the death of their souls, the latticed gate of hell. They will never be able to move or escape, nor ever leave those who came there. The world of the elements that the two creatures pertain to are negatively complementary too, with the fire and air of the phoenix and the water and supposed land of the whale. And likewise, the domains they inhabit are both parallel and contradictory. The phoenix's transformation takes place in Westerståe, Biholene on Bihide, Helata Molin, a wasteland, concealed and hidden from many men. The whale resides among the desolate vastness of Saltne, salty waves. They are both characterized by and concerned with destruction, whose effects are opposite as well. The immolation, self-devouring of the phoenix is opposed to the whale's devouring of the men lured by the sweet scent it produces with its open mouth. They are busy gatherers. The phoenix gathers the sweetest herbs and fruits to build its nest, the symbols of good deeds that he gathers. Whereas the whale gathers, that is, swallows the unwalicha incautiously, undiscerning, thus accumulating their stupidity and consequently their evil inside. And their homes are different also in their time frame. The phoenix's nest is temporary, while the death of the soul, while after the death of the soul, the whale's, that is, hellish damnation, is everlasting. And ultimately, the poem's protagonists are respective expressions of hope and hopelessness, and even more of the limits of comprehension being tested in both and ending with radically different results. And they're both also related to the figure of Jonah, through the idea of building a shelter on the desert. and through the idea of the sort of the swallowing of Jonah. These are two fragments from the book of Jonah. So each of the elements above is understandably a source of wonder with a dimension of a threat, either explicit or implicit, and either related to the body or to the soul. This fearsome wondrousness infuses the two poems as it does other examples of Old English bestiaries. Ratledge appears on 5 in the Phoenix with references to the wondrous beauty of the bird and the wondrous nature of its rebirth. However, it does appear in the whale too, with the beast described as proud and Ratlichan yen, yet wondrous, yes, in its manner of attracting prey. The sense of wonder in the two poems is, however, more profound than around what is Ratledge, yes, and it revolves around the craft, yes, with which the two creatures were devised by the maker. In other words, it is not the creatures that are wondrous, but the craft that makes them so. The presence and roles of craftsmanship in the Phoenix have already attracted the attention of two separate studies. Hilary Fox's 2012 analysis of the theme of Deus Artifacts, divine craftsman, in the poem, and very recently Amy Faulkner's broader examination of crafted things there. Tellingly, the whale, meanwhile, is not short of references to the admiration of craft either, from the Worthcraft Awardum, craft of the verse, with which the whale is revealed to the audience, to the factness crafty, treacherous craftiness of the whale being able to appear as land, the Shina Thou Theoflawisa, the devilishly wise custom of the evil spirit, its slithen seolo, evil craft of deceit, and its description as Beowulf's crafty, distractedly crafty. And as the Toronto Dictionary of Old English attests, the Old English semantic meaning of craft ranges from strength, might, skill, facility, dexterity, merit, excellence, faculty, talent, trick, stratagem to organized body of knowledge. In their negative capacities, these faculties that make the whale an emblem of destruction are not of their own making, but are bestowed upon the animal for a reason that is a part of a divine plan, we may deduce. Jeremy D'Angelo, in his 2013 paper, explains this idea as a reflection on the presence or absence of discretio spirituum, discernment of spirits, in those who are confronted with the whale's cunning. This discretio is one of the charismata that is described by St. Paul's first letter to the Corinthians, which allows, I quote, overcome temptation by delineating between good and evil impulses. It's the idea of being able to recognize evil spirits. Discernment, or rather its lack, is clearly central to the people in the poem, who either mistake the whale for an island and are then dragged by it into the abyss, or who mistake the sweet scent it produces to lure those gullible for the odor of goodness. D'Angelo's conclusions, however, may additionally benefit from the application of the aspects of the timor Dei to the sense of astonishment at the capacity to guile the undiscerning. For what they display is not just lack of discernment, but first and foremost is the lack of capacity for wonder and its consequences. And that makes it impossible for them to imagine that what they understand to be land is in fact the unlonde on land, and that the hellish mouth of the whale and temptations may exude sweet incitements. The allegory of the whale's deceptiveness bears the message about the terrifying consequences of the inability to wonder, and of the belief that there is nothing beyond what is known through the senses. And hence, in an apophatic way, the whale becomes a sort of negative reflection of God, and a positive reflection of God's wisdom acquired through fear. Needless to say, as well as inducing wonder, the whale as the poem's protagonist is predominantly the figure of terror, albeit divinely ordained. Meanwhile, in the Phoenix, ostensibly not a dread-inducing poem, a revised version of the prescribed wonder mechanism, reversed version of the prescribed wonder mechanism may be observed in how the miraculous bird is presented as impervious to any evil then the world standeth, while the world stands. Innocuous though it may sound, the phrase is perhaps ominously repeated twice in the description of the bird's preparation for the immolation. Never him death shattered, on them will one get, then the world standeth. Never will death harm him in that pleasant plain while the world lasts. And ne may him with this week shildum shadan, at ye shildet, a woneth on ye wordet, then the world standeth. Nor may any bitter thing injure him, but he is shielded away, dwelling uninjured, while the world lasts. Thus, although it may be overlooked by those who reject to think beyond what is apparent, a condition is added to the description of the marvelous bird. It reverberates with a threatening suggestion that the world may not always stand. As in the case of the whale, though admittedly less central than there, it is an invitation to think beyond what only seems certain. After all, a little earlier in the poem, the narrator does recall the moment of the world's change. It is when the seemingly perfect domain of the phoenix is portrayed with a reference to the Great Flood, even if it is said not to have affected the land of the bird. Erdan edwenden water ye were there, as it was before the change of the world happened. And thus, as much as the whale, the phoenix too constantly keeps its audience in an implicit emotional tension. And I think that in one of the Alfredian translations, his translation of Psalm 47, or Alfred attributed translation of Psalm 47, we find this state is expressed rather accurately. Here it is. Sorry. And sola swahi jesewan godes wundru. He waren wondrende and waren jedrefte and waren stillende and ondwende for them eie and verchto verhi jegripon. And as soon as they saw God's wonders, they were amazed and disturbed, agitated and overturned by the terror and dread that gripped them. From the fearsome wondrousness of the two creatures, we turn to the applications and manifestations of fear in the two poems, in its explicit and implied forms, and in its negative presence, which I call here apophatic, and which is not self-same with absence, as I said, but with, as I said earlier, the unfear understood as the positive agent of discernment of what lies outside of this emotion. And there is no shortage of references that may be associated with fear in the Phoenix, despite the ostentatious focus on the poem on the allegory of the miraculous transformation. Especially in the second part of the poem, absent in Lactantius's original and beginning in line 380, there are examples of terrifying descriptions of the consequences of the death of the body, as the phrase "the ultimate death" is recalled. Swa that echelif adigda jechwilch after sarlacha self jecheothsef durch the ultimate death that hedrichtnesmod after yerdaium iofonam neotam. Thus, every blessed person chooses that eternal life after the sore tribulation through dark death, so that he may be allowed after the past days to enjoy the Lord's gifts. The Deolka death is also recalled below in line 499 in the poem, but this time as the promise that it will be overcome through drichtnes mertum, the might of the Lord, for the erdkom, the blessed. But in the lines that follow these almost immediately, the audience is presented with a frightening vision of both the death of the body and the destruction of everything that is earthly and transcended, the dread of which is clearly intended as the backdrop and contrast to the fuglestaken, the token of the bird, and the vision of spiritual and physical resurrection of the dead by Christ in majesty. And here's the fragment: Weortef alra jechwelch, folgt on ferpe, tone firbriket, lane londwellen, lig diget, eorthan echt jestreon, apple de gold, jefre fortgripet, gradis swelget, londes fratne, fratwe. Tone on leort kimeth, eldum thesis in the open antit, fire, on je felic, fugle stakken, thone anualt op asteleth of Bergenum, ban je gedrat, leomolich somot, on liefesgast, fore Christus kneo. Everyone will become fearful in their souls when the fire destroys the temporary riches of the lands. The flame eats through the earth's possessions, greedily gripping the apple-shaped gold, voraciously swallowing the ornaments of the world. Then in the light and in that revelatory time comes this aged, fair, and blissful token of the bird, when all of that power rises up from the graves, gathering bones and limbs, and the soul of life shall kneel before Christ. The dreadful dimension of these scenes, combined with their divine visions and symbolism of the bird, no doubt enhances the emotional impact of the poem and serves as the counterbalance to the seemingly terrifying and yet desired and prescribed ordeal of the phoenix assimilation. In the poem's elucidatory part, there's also a direct mention of goddess Ea, fear of God, as the ultimate motivation for those who, obeying the meotud measure, like the phoenix that builds its nest, build their abode of dadum domlichum, glorious deeds against the Erdfeunda, the old fiend. Där him wichtele mig, Erdfeundanan, Erdresheran, Faknes takne, on das Flecknentid. There none of the beings of the old fiend may scathe them with venom, the sign of sin in that terrible time. That is, the lines are directed to a person, it's not to the bird. As long as he herdet meotudes ei, berden breustum, und jebedus secet, clenum jehictum, on his kneopiket, ataletu ertan, flichtie fleichwilch, crimes jeltas, for godes exam, holds the measureless law, boldly in the breast, as long as he holds the measureless law, boldly in the breast and seeks prayers with clean thoughts, and bends the knee nobly to the earth, flees from every evil and grim guilts for the fear of God. And thus, all of the good deeds, adhering to the laws of God, eschewing of evil, and the cleanliness of thoughts, which are listed between lines 451 and 463, are for goddess Exam, the fear of God. While these and several other examples constitute explicit evocations of different types of fear, the emotion is also implicitly present in the phoenix. For one thing, it may be invoked whenever a potentially fear-inducing phrase appears. We have already seen some examples of such usage earlier when I spoke of the conceivably threatening condition of "as long as this world lasts," prophetically added to the descriptions of the bird's practice of rebirth. But implicit references to fear present throughout the poem in other forms, as individual words denoting negative and typically threatening concepts, such as, for instance, death, mentioned 15 times in different contexts, darkness and shadows mentioned 5 times, or bitterness mentioned 4 times in different contexts. And I would also venture a more sweeping statement that the described mode of the phoenix's existence contains such an implicitly threatening aspect in the method of its death and revival through the fires of immolation. Not only because of the painful and hence related to the fear of the death of the body nature of this process, but also as the Old English poem adds a dimension to this life-producing death, which is absent from the Lactantius version and absent from the phoenix's description in the Physiologus. It is in the Old English poem that the bird is described as immolating not on its own accord and by its own faculty, which is the case of the Latin sources, but because of the sun that heats up the carefully constructed nest and Jeshepu Treuke performs its destiny. Thone bront feket, hero Treorges hus, heoch onetet, felo lik feormat und phoenix bernet, feliarum frot. Thone felviget lane likman, livbit on side, fejas feorchor, thone flash and ban, erlich elat. Then the flame engulfs the blood-stained house, phoenix. Turbulent hastens, yellowish red flame feeds and the phoenix burns, with the years that have passed. Then the fire consumes the temporal body. Life is on a journey, the life treasure doomed to death, when flesh and bone kindle the funeral pyre. This description does not lack the disturbance of drama, neither does it lack the terms that are related to inducing the sensation of fear. And since it is the sun that incites the flame, the Old English phoenix, unlike the phoenixes in early Latin sources, is subjected to external agency, implicitly that of God, who administers destruction for rebirth to take place. Aside from the explicit and implicit instances of fear in the Phoenix poem, there's also one other form where it is paradoxically present through its conspicuous absence. The poem's opening passages that describe the land inhabited by the wondrous bird largely consist of the negative statements that speak of the lack of diverse elements there. Half of the poem's 75 opening lines are constructed in this manner, which simultaneously, though in an apophatic way, characterize the lands where the phoenix does not reside. That is, the lands well familiar to the poem's audiences, their lands. Here's an example of a longer such description in which the tones and details common to those present in the Exeter book elegies resound loudly. Nis ter ondam londe. Latgenidla, ne wop, ne raku, watakanam, ildu ne ermdu, ne se engadat, ne lifesliga, ne lafeskime, ne sin, ne sachu, ne salaku, ne wadle yewin, ne welan onsin, ne sorg, ne slap, ne swalleya, ne winter yewarp, ne wedera yeblag, hreoch under hefunum, ne se hadra fost kaldum, kile yikelum, knisser ernidne. Daar ne heil, ne grim, greosa toevoordan, ne windy wolken, net al watervallen, lifte je pisat, at der lagus dramas. In that land there is no hateful enemies, no weeping, no suffering, no signs of woe, old age or afflictions, nor the closeness of death, nor loss of life, nor oncoming hatred, no sin, nor contention, no sore tribulation, no strife of poverty, no lack of prosperity, no sorrow, nor sleep, no oppressive sickness, no tossing of winter, no frightening weather, cruel under heavens, no hard frost with cold icicles beating anyone. There no hail, no frost fall to the earth, no windy clouds, there no water crushes down oppressed by the breeze. Each and every of the details listed as absent in the land of the phoenix is a disturbing and terrifying presence in the reality lived by the audience. What does this apophatic characterization through such notable absence of fear stimuli bring to the poem's allegorical meaning, aside from adding aspects of wondrousness to it? Does it not, in fact, point to what lies outside of fear, that is, to the ability to imagine transcending it in the manner the phoenix transcends the fear of the death of the body in order to avoid the death of the soul? In closing, I will not dwell too long on the parallel ways of manifesting and employing fear in the whale, where the emotion is by far more evident in the senses associated with the warning against the lack of discernment. The poem engages it most explicitly and in numerous instances. Aside from its destructive craftiness, which I mentioned earlier, the whale is frekne on Ferdgrim, dangerously terrible and fierce in mind. This Garsejas yes, spirit of the spear sea, a Shina, evil spirit. It exercises a quicksusle, living torment on those he drags to the bottom of the ocean. It is a Fjöldbona, slayer of souls, and a Merewerd, warden of the sea. The implicit use of fear is likewise present in the whale. This implicit terror, however, does not stem from the frightening creature, but is the terror of the realization that an unwarliche, incautious person intentionally hastens towards the damnation. The audiences learn with likely dread, perhaps, that such a person opens the helle hlinduru, latticed gate of hell for themselves, entering it willingly because of their ignorance and, as I've already pointed out, because of their inability to wander wisely. Himse awerkta on jan, after hinsi the helle on tinnet, dam the lesliche, liches wene, offer fertirecht, fremedon on unrad. The cursed one opens up hell for their coming after hurrying towards it, those who falsely engage in their bodily joys rather than the spirit's honest cause of doing good, not foolish. And again, as if in conclusion to this thought, 4 lines below we read that the annuaria giltum jechrodene, adorned with their faults, which is another instance of implicitly engaged fear, which incidentally negatively echoes the poems. The phoenix is ornamenting its nest with glorious deeds. Apophatically, as I have suggested, the whale serves as a negative reflection of God, as a positive reflection of God's wisdom acquired through the expected thinking beyond fear. If we were to apply the understanding of evil as the lack of good proposed by Pseudo Dionysius in his De Divinis Nominibus, the divine names, the threat of the apparent evil, in this case of the whale, is in itself productive, in this case productive of the wisdom of discernment. The un londe an land, in line 14 of the whale, that is that the unsuspecting sailors wish to rest upon, bears with itself the realization of the truth for the audience, even if it is too late for the poem's sailors to save their bodies and their souls. In conclusion, I will reiterate that regardless of the differences of their provenance, both poems are perhaps the most complex of Old English animal allegories that are less concerned with the animals they represent, as is the case of the panther, but they're concerned with how they serve their audiences. Their focus is clearly on human reactions to the allegorical representations of the hope for revival and the dangers of miscomprehension. The study of the forms of fear in the poems contributes to their emotional understanding, I think, is both on the most immediate of levels, that is, on how the poems may have effectively impacted on their audiences, but also on how they inform us about the poetics and politics of fear of their time. And I'll just finish with a slide with a list of references, for, or the most important references to which I will perhaps return later. And I will thank you very much. It's very warmly using, sort of popular, sort of, as it were, popular takes on both animals, and the second of these is a sort of very famous Polish poem for children. It's called Mr. Minuscule. Thank you so much for your kind attention and for your patience. Thank you very, very much.